We want to thank you for tuning in to listening to the Pan-African Leadership Center. This is the brainchild of Daniel Mavonu out of Kenya. Thought about bringing individuals together to have a discussion about issues of health, wellness, political activism for the Africa community. Living out the dream and vision of Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere and others who talked about the Pan-African agenda. This is why we are here. We're discussing the Pan-African agenda for African people. So thank you again for being here. And also I want to let you know that we have with us a prolific, profound, inspirational brother, black man out of the Gambia, who's inspired me tremendously to do the work that I do in the Gambia. If it were not for him, I probably would not have made the trip to the Gambia, the several trips I've made to the Gambia. He has inspired me to do this. His name is Dr. Ishmael Baji. He is the owner of Innovarex Global Health. The brother has created this health paradigm within the continent of Africa that is not only in the Gambia, but also in Ghana, and he's spreading all over the region around health and wellness for our people. Dr. Badju, welcome to the Pan-African Leadership Center.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having me. And the kind introduction, I don't think I'm worthy of it, but I appreciate it nonetheless. It's good to be here.
So tell us about you, the work that you do. I know that you started off, your undergraduate work was at HBCU in the United States, Tennessee State University. And I think that you did your graduate work at Purdue.
Yes.
And so you are a legal drug dealer. You're a pharmacist. So tell us about your journey and your history, and how did you get to be involved in the process of elevating health for African people?
No, thank you so much. And I'm glad you started where you did with my HBCU experience, because I tell people I'm second generation HBCU because my father went to Russ College in Mississippi in the 70s, which was not the normal route for an African student to come to the USA and experience a HBCU in the 70s in Mississippi. So anybody who just pictures being in Mississippi in the 70s could kind of paint that picture. So we come from a family of HBCUs. I think everybody in my family, but my younger brother, went to a HBCU. So from Tennessee State University down in Nashville, younger sister went to Spelman. And I think that is so important to me, because it's, once again, not the typical experience for an African immigrant to be immersed into Black history the way a HBCU does. So it almost insulates you and kind of shows you Black excellence from a lens that a PWI, quite frankly, would not give you. As well too, and of course with a lot of different rich experiences that come with going to an HBCU. So that's so much of who I am today, because it's allowed me to live almost like a hyphen between two worlds that often the residents of both worlds don't mingle or mesh to appreciate and understand each other's history. So that's so much of who I am today. I pledged a fraternity at a HBCU, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, as well as part of my experience. So that's where I started, and then transitioned to a PWI, where I got my Doctor of Pharmacy at Purdue University. So I went from a 95% Black school to a 2% Black school, but nonetheless had a rich experience from a professional standpoint, which allowed me to enter the healthcare space as a licensed and legal drug dealer, as you mentioned it. But yeah, more so in the community. So much of my work is rooted in community health, community pharmacy. Spent a lot of time working in rural North Carolina, urban North Carolina as well, dealing with different disease states that affect, a lot of people. Especially in our communities, which kind of has always been the inspiration for what Innovarex Global Health is now in Africa.
Yeah, I like what you said about the immersion experience for Africans in the U.S. You said that it's not the normal track, right? What is the normal track for for Africans immigrants to come into this space?
Yeah, well, to leave Africa, that's one. I think our school system, for better or for worse, it's the British colonial systems instilled a system that trains us to leave. So everybody wants to leave. And I think when you're leaving, historically, Black college is not something you pinpoint. You just want to go to college. And that typically could leave you going to Europe for university, or in the USA is wherever your opportunity is. You almost have to be intentional or come from a family like I did to kind of choose an HBCU. But yeah, the typical experience is just not, and even quite frankly, even at a HBCU, not a lot of African students actually blend in and are completely immersed as well too. So it's quite a nuance, but it shouldn't be that way, because it should be the more natural path, if you ask me.
Right. So it seems like then to leave Africa to go to a Black space is not the thing to do, which is part of the colonial educational system. Absolutely. To train us to despise ourselves. And so why would I leave a Black space and go to a Black space, right? So
yeah, you could almost consider it less than. And I think that the tragedy is, like, people on the continent have like the wrong perception of, the Black experience in the USA, the same way Black people in America sometimes may have the wrong perception of the African experience. So what better, or I guess worse scenario is to kind of keep them separated, where they're still living in unknowns. And I think it's just, it's done more harm for the diaspora, if you ask me.
Right. So you said that you came from a household where there was this level of consciousness. Kind of talk about that a little bit, right? That shift that your dad went to Rust College.
Yeah, the easiest way to describe it is like, I left Gambia when I was 17, and I knew about Rosa Parks. I knew about Emmett Till. Like, I knew about MLK. Like, I knew about Black history in a way of like that was holistic, where the average even 30-year-old African man walking in the streets today may not have no idea about the people that I just mentioned, right? And that's what I mean, where it's like, one, Black excellence exists, but also our history, there's a continuum in our history that you have to understand the entire process, which I think my dad exposed us to. Consciously or subconsciously, it was just a part of his life, so it became a part of our life. He was heavily involved early with creating spaces for African Americans to journey back home. And some of his work with the ministry would also expose us to a lot of people that happened to be HBCU graduates. So my older brother, it was natural for him to start at Mississippi Valley State University, another HBCU, before transferring over to Tennessee State. So it's just that awareness of it, and being able to understand the history, both the good and the bad. That way it's a more complete picture. And a 17-year-old Gambian perception of Black America is not 50 Cent and Beyonce, but it's more Langston Hughes and, Paul Robeson, Thurgood Marshall, W.E.B. Du Bois, understanding, Frederick Douglass, that history. So it has to be intentional.
Yes. So you mentioned, of course, the household, the Pan-African concept, right? The idea that you all came from Africa, attended HBCU, you joined a Black fraternity. Kwame Nkrumah, right, did a lot of his work, Lincoln University, right, the awakening piece, so the Pan-African. And so he took that unusual, unconventional trek as well, coming out of a British colonized space. So this idea of decolonizing the mind, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o talks about, is something that it seems that like you actually have been on the path of, right? The same idea of how do you decolonize the mind of yourself, your family, and that then has decolonized everything that you do. Is that pretty accurate?
Absolutely. Kwame Nkrumah joined Phi Beta Sigma. If anything, a lot of the founding fathers who were exposed to the USA, if anything, had a better appreciation and understanding of like the Black struggle from a holistic perspective than young Africans today. I don't know where we lost it along the way, but a lot of our founding fathers on the continent that made it to the USA were heavily engaged and involved with, leaders, thought leaders from this side of the world. So it's not a novel idea to be swinging between two of the experiences. We've just kind of lost it along the way.
Wow. And this was not even part of the conversation, y'all. This is just add on. We are here with Dr. Ismail Abaji. He is the founder of Innovarex Global Health in the Gambia. Got his education in the U.S. around in pharmacy at Purdue, undergraduate, was at Tennessee State University and HBCU. And he took that genius that he had and born within him back to the Gambia. So now he has this business, Innovarex Global Health. Tell us about that particular enterprise.
Yeah, so part of my experience working as a pharmacist in community health, I was exposed to a lot early. Luckily, like I worked for Walgreens for a very long time. And I think the epiphany or the light bulb moment happened when I was working I spent a lot of time working in rural America. And the biggest misconception people have is a lot of the challenges that people face in rural America are exactly the same as living in Africa. Lack of access to healthcare, poverty is rampant. People don't live close to a hospital. A lot of these issues are similar, right? So what I saw happening with technology, where now you go to a community pharmacy, your local CVS, your local Walgreens, you walk in, it's not a pharmacy like you used to know it. It has a lab, it has a nurse practitioner, it has a pharmacy. It's integrated, which is where healthcare is not only going, but is now, right? It becomes a one-stop shop where people could just get primary care. So I saw the model as like, okay, this opportunity, this is what Africa needs right now, because so many of our challenges are similar and we are still vulnerable. The ecosystem is so vulnerable to counterfeit medications. Like Gambia doesn't have enough doctors. For a population of 2.5 million people, Gambia has 10,000 Gambians to one doctor, right? For 2.5 million people, there's less than 50 pharmacists who are trained to kind of know what medication is supposed to do and how to leverage that access where all the fancy, nice hospitals are in the city. So it leaves people in the rural communities very vulnerable without access to healthcare. The same way some areas in the USA have food deserts, well, healthcare deserts exist in Africa all over as well too. So we built our business model to basically have a world where healthcare could meet people where they are in the most cost-effective way. So everything the company does is to create a level playing field where now, just because somebody's grandmother is living, an hour away from a city, they could have access to the same medication that you would in your local pharmacy in Atlanta or in New York, right? So it's very integrated where we allow people to define what wellness means to them, and then we help provide it, right? And I think that's also a very radical approach to healthcare where, right, we don't spoon feed people, this is what you need. We're realistic with the ecosystem, but just try to create a healthier version of people that we come across and not, waving a magic wand, trying to, save as many people as we can. So that's what Innovarex does. It's an integrated health ecosystem that goes from providing preventative health screening, like primary care services, up until management of somebody who needs monthly medications, needs access to a doctor that we use telehealth, gets at-home delivery with our Wellness on Wheels logistics platform. So it's very integrated. And we allow people in the diaspora to be able to sponsor the care of their loved ones. So now we create more transparency. So traditionally, Africans send money back home, but they don't spend money back home because there's not an infrastructure to kind of spend directly and know where your money's going. So a lot of thought process went into it. I think everything in Innovarex is an embodiment of my life experience, my shared experiences, knowing 2 countries as home my whole life. So yeah, that's what it is in a nutshell.
Wow. So Wellness on Wheels. When I heard about that, that was really impressive. Wellness on Wheels. This is where you actually go out into the community and you address non-communicable diseases. Share more about that because I am sure that the same diseases that we have are prevalent in the Gambia, the same ones here, the hypertension and so forth. So tell us more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wellness on Wheels. I think that's the most dynamic and impactful aspect of the company. The word literally encapsulates what it does. It's wellness on wheels. So how do you define wellness? There's two things, right? From a preventative standpoint, we realized that the average Gambian did not have access to check their blood pressure, their blood sugar, right? To understand if they're diabetic, if they have hypertension, their body mass index or their body composition to see if they're obese or going through malnutrition. So what we built as part of our business model is we go into communities that are normally healthcare deserts and provide access to pre-basics preventative health screening. That's as simple as going into a community, talking to the village elder, telling them you have 200 people living in a town. We want to screen everybody for their blood pressure, their blood sugar, and their BMI to see if they have a healthy weight, right? We've been doing that since 2019, December. And on average, 4 out of 10 people that we screen are either diabetic, hypertension, or they have an unhealthy weight. And a lot of them have no idea. So a lot of reasons, and this is not only in Africa, healthcare in general, the reason why healthcare is expensive is a significant amount of people only interact with healthcare in a time of crisis and emergency. That is where healthcare is expensive, right? So our business model, we try to catch people earlier in their funnel of life where you could provide preventative health screenings. And it's cheaper to do it there. But even if they do now have a condition like diabetes or hypertension, which you have to live with for the rest of your life, we are in a position to provide a continuity of care, monthly medications, access to a nutritionist, which is a huge component of our business model. Because I fundamentally, believe that food heals just as much as medications. You do it hand in hand. Access to a doctor. Gambia doesn't have a lot of doctors, so we leverage telehealth. We run one of the most sophisticated, electronic health record systems, I think, in the African region right now. And we meet people where they are. So one encounter with somebody's grandmother in a village could turn into Wellness on Wheels delivering medications every single month. Her having virtual consultations with a nutritionist who's in the Gambia or somewhere else. Right. So many aspects of it as well, too. So that's what Wellness on Wheels has been. And it's become the model that's actually growing in the sub-region as well, too, because if you take Africa, the Caribbean, some parts of USA, if healthcare could knock on your door every 30 days and just check on grandmother, check her blood pressure, even if she's fine, that human interaction alone is so valuable as well, too. And it's just a contribution to society and just humanity as a whole that makes it feel like a responsibility.
So while we're on this topic, right? So how do people, you mentioned about money, Gambia, supporting loved ones, Wellness on Wheels.
Yep.
So what is your money, your money line like? I mean, how does this work? Right?
Yeah. So Africa in general, Gambia, for example, $700 million goes into Gambia every single year, from people like myself who live in the USA who send money back home. Nigeria, bigger population, over $17 billion goes back into Nigeria every single year, right? A significant portion of that money goes towards healthcare. On average, it could be anywhere from 25 to 30%, right? But that money that goes there is no way of tracking if whoever you're sending it for is actually receiving the healthcare that they need, because ecosystems don't exist where you could just pay directly to Innovarex. And then that grandmother needs to get her monthly medication or she needs to see a doctor. You go to IGH.GM or InnovarexGlobal.com and directly be able to pay for the service from anywhere in the world. And then sometimes within less than an hour, she gets a knock on her door with somebody delivering the medications or there to provide a service, right? So that's the ecosystem we've created where now any individual from anywhere in the world who may need a clinical service or a wellness product like a vitamin C or ibuprofen because she has some aches and pains could literally just go on our online platform, purchase it, and then Wellness on Wheels does the rest, right? This is why our business model, half of our revenue doesn't come from the Gambia. So typically they'll tell you, well, Africa's poor, the market size is not big enough. Yeah, but Black people are not poor. Like the wealthiest, we have a significant amount of wealth. Part of it too is the wealthiest Black people don't live on the continent because they've migrated, right? And when I mean Black people, I mean everybody in the entire diaspora as well too. So Africa has to move in a way that our businesses allow financial participation from Black people from all over the world, where now wealth creation is happening on the continent by Black communities, supported by Black communities across the world. And I think that's such an intentional part of our business model, because if not, 50 years from now, there'll be a lot of wealth created in Africa, but it won't be our wealth. And there's nothing wrong with it. We live in a capitalist society. It's nothing radical about saying like, hey, it's a meritocracy. If you have a good idea, a good solution, you build it, people will pay for it. But I think it's also high time that also Black people are intentional about wealth creation, where it's not taboo to sit our kids down and tell them this is how you build a multi-generational company. Because if one person does it, they hire thousands of individuals, those lives improve. 10% of those individuals might grow out to start their own business. So you have a ripple effect, and wealth stays in the community longer. And I think sometimes we just don't talk about it enough as a community. I don't know why, but we should. So yeah, a lot of our business model is very intentional about catering to the pain points of people who look like us, who go through the same challenges, and doing it in a way that is not less than, that's not a Africa solution. No, this is a formidable healthcare solution anywhere in the world. We are just intentional about Africa being the first recipients of it as well.
This is a whole nother discussion, right? This idea of wealth building in African consciousness, and so you got to come back so we can talk about that alone, about how do we think about wealth and wealth generation. I want to really slide back to something that you said, and this is what Dr. Badji is talking about are facts, right? So I have receipts for what just actually took place. When we were there with one of our guests traveled with us to the Gambia. She became ill on the trip, something upset stomach, and we actually made the phone call to Rex Global Health. Someone took the information about what was happening over the phone, made a preliminary diagnosis, and when I tell you, within less than 30 minutes, somebody was there with medication for our guest, and this is a real model. Now, the other side of that model is that I became ill, slight upset stomach, and rather than call, I got a ride to the place, the location, and again, the evaluation was done, and within minutes, I had the medication, and for both of us, the medication that we received actually addressed the issues that we encountered. Just this past trip, Dr. Badji, there was another person, a baby, an infant. He's less than a year old, a toddler, and of course, putting his mouth on various things. His stomach got not accustomed to it. Had similar issues. We got him to your facility, and within 24 hours, he was back acting as he had been acting prior to. Mm-hmm. So I can attest to this particular institution being effective. It's not just simply words, idle discourse, but Dr. Badji has put it into practice that is providing optimal healthcare in a space that does not receive such and the way that it should receive it. And so we have answers to problems and solutions, but we don't see them because we're so busy looking in the direction that the oppressor wants us to look, that is to see what we don't have. But this is an example of what we do have as an you mentioned access point, but this is who we have, right? Dr. Ismaila Badji. Now you have taken this model, and you've moved it from the Gambia. Now you are going into Ghana.
Nigeria. We've expanded that.
Nigeria.
Into Nigeria, and Ghana's in the works as well too. Because it's a model that grows. I think when we set out, Gambia was a training ground. It was a pilot country. But I think the company is now in a place where we could go to any country in Africa, any country in the Caribbean, and replicate it not only on an equal level, but faster, because we've kind of paid the school fees. We've learned the lessons. We've optimized the technology to work for the local economy. So we're definitely in a stage where we are going to grow it, because so much of our pain points go across the world, honestly. So yeah, we're in the growth phase right now.
So the this model that you have is about providing optimal health, and I'm serious about having this economic development piece, because
absolutely,
that is serious. And I know that you're a deeply spiritual person, so I want to actually come kind of follow that on the backside of our conversation. But I'm moved by a story that I just heard about in the Gambia, where children are having renal issues, kidney issues, in part because of medication. And so the conversations about bad medication being given to our children in the Gambia. Talk more about the medicines that we receive, and why do you take such great precaution to receive medications from certain areas so that you don't encounter this particular this issue?
Yeah, I think that the country is undergoing some kind of reckoning that I always knew it was a matter of when, not if, because it's part of our why, right? If you look at Gambia, sub-Saharan Africa, counterfeit medications is $1 billion industry in sub-Saharan Africa. And you wonder why, right? The healthcare drug chain market, the US consumes a lot of generic medications, which is just brand name. Some medications that are not brand name, right? The same countries that manufacture generic medications for the USA send a different grade of medications to the USA than they do Africa.
So they send a lower grade of medication to the continent.
Yeah, lower grade meaning it's counterfeit. It would not pass quality control anywhere in the Western world, which is sickening. At the root of it, if you think about it, there's a level of, it's just a level of, it just makes you wonder why. When it comes to
it's evil. That's the bottom line.
It's evil, right? When it comes to food, when it comes to medications, things that are not worthy of being sent to the Western world, Africa is a dumping ground for it, to not only cause harm, which fundamentally that's what you're doing, but also to make a lot of money, because our ecosystems are vulnerable. Like, we don't have the infrastructure to test every product on the market. You know, our supply chain is riddled with conflicts of interest. Our borders are porous, so you never know what's coming in. So it's a business model for a vulnerable society. So if you wake up and then there's acute kidney injury happening because somebody consumed medication, well, if your market is full of medications that may not be of quality, this is going to happen, right? And the question, it begs the question: who is responsible for protecting the citizens of the nation? Who is? Is it the government? Is it the private sector? Right? Well, you could go down that line and you'll never find answers. What we do is Innovarex Global Health sources 100% of our medications from the USA, not because there's something special about the USA, because fundamentally, I just believe that my grandmother, my mom, my aunts, my cousins deserve the same medications that people on this side of the world do. So if you are a distributor and you are sending the good stuff over here and not to Africa, that's fine. I am going to go and buy it where you're sending it to. And because the company is a US company, because I'm a pharmacist who's worked over 10 years in the industry, I understand that, okay, the best way to protect the people of the Gambia or the people of Africa, from my perspective, is where do I source it from? So it changes the conversation now from a distributor, which I get emails every single day. If I ask you, you're trying to sell me a product, can you sell this product to the USA? If your answer is no, my answer is no. I don't even want to go down the rabbit hole as to why you can't do it, because the FDA protects the American consumer in a way that what's happening in Gambia right now, people will go to jail right now in the USA. Companies will be shut down. Like, people who understand the history of medications in the country could understand Tylenol had a scare a couple of decades ago, where Johnson and Johnson, to this day, that's one of their biggest scars because of that Tylenol incident that happened from an adulteration of medication, right? But in Gambia, it's just Friday, right? So people are going to point fingers, but at the end of the day, unless companies are protecting consumers by sourcing from the right places, you're going to have these problems. And because they found out that kids are having acute kidney injury, how many millions who died and they never found out that what actually killed them was something that was supposed to heal them, which is, once again, it's so sick if you think about it, right? Where a child who is in discomfort, pain, they are seeking medication, and what they're running towards actually ends them causes them their life. Because once again, our kidneys, as most people know, whatever you put into your body at some point is going to knock on your kidneys or your liver, for better or for worse. So those are the two organs where it's quick to have damage based on medications, because if it runs through your liver, right, too much of it is going to cause some liver damage. If it runs through your kidney, which is our filtration system as human beings, anything that's bad or harmful that goes in is going to do harm in your kidneys. So it's not a surprise where, if medication is not adulterated from a chemical and medicinal standpoint, it causes harm as well too. So it's such a tragedy, but I'm not surprised that it's happening. If anything, it just causes more concern. It creates an urgency to kind of help protect the people a little bit better,
Right. So this idea of the the paracetamol syrup that was causing this kidney failure within children. Over 28 children have died in the Gambia.
That's what they think. Yeah,
go ahead.
That's what they think it is, and there's a level of mystery, which it goes to show you it's something that did not belong in that syrup that happens, because most chemists know that paracetamol, which is the same thing as Tylenol, acetaminophen. In the USA, we call it acetaminophen. Most of the parts of the world, they call it paracetamol, right? Tylenol typically affects your livers more likely. That's why adults, there's a maximum amount of Tylenol that you could take, because too much of it causes damage to your liver, right? So most of the toxicity is normally associated with livers, not kidneys, like your typical, anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, Advil, that lean more towards the kidney. So the fact that paracetamol or Tylenol, that is more commonly associated with like liver toxicity, is affecting the kidneys, begs the question, what else was in that bottle, or what actually was in that bottle, right? So hopefully, people much smarter than I am will do the research and find out what it was, but it's going to be difficult to trace. It's almost finding a needle in a haystack, because so much of the products, once they enter the ecosystem, you don't know where they came from, how they got there. So it's going to be a challenge as well. So even the CDC is in the Gambia right now helping in the efforts, but it's just a really hard one to digest.
Right. So part of the narrative that I've received is that this chemical is more of a filler to make it have a sweeter taste. So the glycerin was in there, but they instead of put that in there, they use another chemical that is that tastes very similar, but it's found in brake fluid and other things like that. I mean, that's the narrative that I have received. And I don't know the details right now. That's not my space, but I do know that if that is the case, if there is this lacing of medication for children, we're talking then about an evil enterprise. And we have to be able to call it out for what it is, to be able to address it. And sometimes we're afraid to do that, but who would wantonly kill or jeopardize the health of children? And this is, as you said, the paradox. Parent is entrusting a system to bring their child to health. So this means that there's love for a child, and you're going to take away a child for someone who's not neglecting their child, but is seeking to provide the best care possible for their child to live. And ironically, this child dies from the medication. So we have to be able to understand what Dr. Badji is sharing with us, is that there is this process by which we receive lesser services, we receive lesser medications with it, which then promotes ill health. And I would submit that part of the problem, Dr. Badji, is that we don't take our genius back to the continent and develop our own products, right? We have that particular genius there and we don't do it. We go and we become educated everywhere else, and then we don't do anything to promote healthcare on the continent. And just recently, at I think it was Harvard Medical School, the top graduates of the school come from Nigeria, and yet we have these issues, right? So we have to be clear that a part of this, as you said earlier, is something that we're doing or not doing that we need to do better. And that is that when we take our genius back to the continent. So this is why I'm so excited about what you're doing, is because you're bringing the genius back to the continent. And so as we talk about healthcare and the evils of a healthcare system, let's talk about some of the positives, right? So we know that our people have understood for years how to address issues such as hypertension, or to address erectile dysfunction and other things. So let's dive into that just for a moment, right? The healthcare, natural healthcare that we know that exists there. Like I know that there's Nebadai, there's Boy, there's Kinkly Bar, other teas and so that exist. So share with us about what we know and how we can think about those chemicals. Also, we talk about the moringa powder and so forth. So
yeah, I mean, it's the great unknown, right? I think that Africa doesn't lack anything from a resources standpoint. Whatever type of resource, financial resource, medicinal resource, human resource, the continent has been blessed beyond measure. And before the advancements of modern medicine as we know it, to creative in professions like the one I have now, like people sought out medicinal herbs that were readily available to them, right? And I think it's, if anything, if we look back in the past 100 years, that's been our biggest missed opportunity in terms of identifying these nebadai, the herbs, the baobabs, a lot of things that people are calling superfoods, superfruits, like certain grains that have a low glycemic index that prevent you from having diabetes. There's like a plethora of all these naturally available herbs, grains, seeds that people have understood for so long, but not continued the clinical or the scientific process of refinement, dosing, right? That could add benefit to it as well too. It's funny that even a lot of the modern medicine is going back and realizing like, hey, moringa, marmbar, baobab, all these things, it's power in these herbs and fruits. Why don't we do more, right? And I think a part of that too is like African history has been oral. It's not folklore, but it's passed down from generations to generations. So a bush or a shrub that grandmother took, seven leaves and boiled it in a bucket that you drank. Grandmother just had that wisdom and that knowledge, but there's never been an opportunity to really expound on it and actually do research where now you could dose it, because we know human beings are different. So if I'm 6'5", 215 pounds, I may process a herb differently than a child who's maybe 4 foot and weighs 70 pounds, which I think is the next iteration of like African medicine, traditional medicine that needs to happen, where chemists, once again, going back to our thought leaders, like our scientists, being able to do research on these herbs and preserve that intellectual property, knowing that there's a natural abundance that God has already given us by making it readily available, outside of people's homes. I think that's the biggest opportunity. But are there some medicinal properties? 100%. I mean, most modern medicines that we consume come from natural sources anyways. So it's just the refinement of it that needs to happen. And I think more and more individuals are getting hold of it, the powers of marmara, the powers of baobab, the powers of kinkeliba, right? Grains like fonio, that is way more powerful and underutilized, right? So it's just so much opportunity, and there's so much tradition of health healing that we need to preserve, document. If not, it'll be extracted and then resold to us at a higher price, which typically tends to be the cycle if we don't take advantage of it. But yeah,
right. So I'm hearing that our time is running short, so I'm going to. I hear the alarm system in the background. So I wanted to really, emphasize this conversation that we're having about this traditional knowledge for healing. I think this is a space that we need to spend a lot of time in, right? So as you talk about the superfoods, right? Moringa being a superfood, and we know that moringa is in the Gambia. And I know people swear by Nebada. Nebada is all over the place. It's very resistant. It has a mind of its own. It does what it wants to do. But what is it that we need to do, right? As a form of, so you talk about the issue of size, height, weight, and those kind of things that would influence the amount. But somehow our ancestors understood, and you mentioned the idea of passed down orally. I think we have to understand that it's a part of what's considered to be epistemology of African people, that Europeans learned by counting and measuring. And it doesn't matter whether you find ourselves on the continent of Africa, in the US, it's by a symbolic imagery and affect, right? So this idea of going to the space, going to the bush, going in the forest, extracting the one that is the correct one, and identifying why it is the correct one. Because you can have something that looks like something, but it's not it, right? Or it may not be mature enough, or maybe over mature. So that's a way of knowing that has been tried and tested over time. And so though it is not written, because it doesn't have to be written, I always ask the question all the time, which came first, the musical notes on a sheet of music or somebody playing music? And people always say, well, of course, playing the music, because that is the most effective way of communication. So I think that we really need to pay attention to the enterprise, because the enterprise of what our ancestors have done has shaped the medical practices in the United States, especially. We talk about vaccines and other things. They started from African knowledge, and yet we don't get the credit for it. And we're told that somehow we're less than, like, again, being a musician, because I don't read music, I'm somehow less than a musician. I'm not. I mean, I do read music, but the point is, I'm not less of a musician because I don't read music. I just have not developed that particular skill set. And so we have to do a better job, right? Recognizing the power.
And merge the two. I think we have to exist in a world where somebody with my knowledge sits in a room with a traditional healer, because the human body is so responsive. Like, what you put in will always elicit a response. That goes with food, drugs and alcohol, medication, right? So you could always merge the two between, traditional medicine that is more almost like it's nuanced and based on feel, like you said. Like, it's the same way an African mother could cook without measurements for a family of 4, and then the next day for a guest of 100 people, without ever using a measuring spoon. So there's a level of nuance that a lot of the people that have deep wisdom understand. So how do you put these two individuals in a room to now be able to do it at scale, where, once again, going back to healthcare, bringing it right back, it becomes more accessible if the solution somebody needs is growing abundantly outside, and they could take it in a way that's, safe and effective. Then you're just democratizing wellness in a way that's very unconventional, but how God designed it anyway, because he made those things abundantly available from the beginning.
And there you go. So now into your conversation, right? So being a deeply spiritual brother as you are, and I'm always moved by how you conceptualize the work that you do in the context of the divine, right? God and the movement. So share more about that, right? So you believe this is a idea of a calling on your life to promote health and wellness in the Gambia and all over the continent. You are doing it definitely for us on this side, and I am excited about the opportunities to be able to address the issues that our ancestors and that our people are encountering even today in the U.S. I would just pause for a moment and suggest what I've talked about often is that we're suffering from non-communicable diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and other aspects of ill health, in large part, I believe, because of, again, the stressors of racism, but also we are taken away from the soil that we have, that we were originally a part of. And so we're not receiving the medicines from the earth that we need to receive. So our bodies are not receiving back what they need. And therefore we're operating from a space of being depleted. And I think this is why this is so critical. So when we start having this conversation about how folks were addressing hypertension, I mean, no, not hypertension, diabetes, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I know every Black family in the U.S. has somebody with hypertension, diabetes, or kidney issues. And so we have to do this thing, and that is make the connection. But talk about your spiritual journey, your spiritual path. I mean, it's heavy how you conceptualize the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's and most of the times, like, you have to, when something is drawing you from a spiritual standpoint and you can't explain it, but everything in your life has kind of been aligning to kind of move you in this direction, it not only becomes a spiritual journey, which gives you the strength to kind of do something that it's been the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, but the most fulfilling, because every single iteration of the journey, you realize that, okay, this is where God's pointing you towards. And there's things that's happened in my life. So I was in the USA for the first, 6-7 years of my life before moving back. So I lost my grandmother at 56 years old who had diabetes and hypertension. So I never really got to know her, didn't understand the implications of these diseases on our families until I was a little bit older. At 28 years old, I was diagnosed with hypertension. So I've been living with hypertension as well too, for going on 10 years as well too. But more than anything else as well too, is like how our generation, we see health, but if you read the word itself, HEALTH, heal comes before the TH. But so much of how we're taught about health is when something goes wrong, find a way to heal it. When health should begin from a healthy human being, you giving them the knowledge, the wisdom that is more holistic, wellness, nutrition, mental health, physical health, emotional health, all encompassing at an early stage to build a foundation of knowledge, information that prevents them to need to be healed sooner than they need to, meaning you extend their life a little bit longer, right? So I think that's almost been like a driving force. And quite frankly, especially in Africa, for decades, we have depended on other people to solve our problems, not only with health, but with everything, when we should see it as a responsibility to actually provide the solutions, because we have the information, we have the knowledge. So most people tell me, why are you doing what you're doing? It's like, if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? Right? And that's not to be on like, okay, I'm this massive martyr or a savior. No, it's like spiritually, if something is not drawing you kind of towards what you need to create in a strong way, then what else would, right? If you think about it, like based on the company, what it's designed to do, if it could give more opportunity to human beings to live a longer life, meaning you're expanding their human experiences, you're creating solutions of value in a business context, then why not do it, right? And it's, once again, it's been the hardest thing we've had to do, because as you know, like even the way Africa is set up, it's easier to get a donation, somebody who dumps 50 bags of rice, puts it on TV and moves on, versus somebody who's going to invest in like somebody who could grow rice so that they could feed the people and teach the people. So we're always looking for solutions elsewhere. And, God's just been, it's been a guiding force for this journey. And I think more things that are aligning you get confirmation that you're doing it for the right reasons as well too. So it's a huge component to it.
So I appreciate you so much for the work and agreeing to pull us along on your journey.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing us to be able to start mental health service delivery in
Yes.
the Gambia. We have to continue that work in a very concerted effort way. Thank you. But anything that you want to say in closing as we come to an end, some closing statements that you want to leave people with? How do they catch up with you and everything else? Go ahead.
Just gratitude, gratitude, man. This journey hasn't been one. Granted, yes, I have the responsibility for nurturing the idea, because I really do believe that God put this idea in my mind for a reason, for a particular time. But it would not have been, it wouldn't come to fruition without a lot of people who've been part of the community that want to solve this problem from an investor standpoint. Majority of our company is owned by Black individuals who, have passion, in building a better Africa, from our staff who do the day-to-day work, who believe in the vision, professionals like yourself who were not born in the Gambia, but have visited the Gambia by virtue of me being the vessel. And I think that is so powerful, where for every person who is a hyphen, and I use that hyphen because you exist between like what people will call an African and an American. I consider myself a hyphen, somebody who's in between. That hyphen should be a tunnel. It should be a gateway to kind of bring whatever is good from this side of the world and extend it to the other side of the world. Because you have visited the Gambia to see that the moment you're in Gambia, you feel a sense of like, this is what home is. And I think more Black people in the world should participate economically in Africa. I think that is so important. So just gratitude in terms of everybody who supported, wants to join, either through services, through investments, through people like you who provide value on the continent. Just extremely grateful to have that opportunity and to be in this time and space, which I think more than anything else, there's never been more visibility. There's never been more conversation about that Pan-African, responsibility that we all have. And W.E.B. Du Bois said it only takes 10%, just a talented 10th,
to move forward.
To move forward.
Wow.
So if 1 in 10 Black people in the world just looked on the continent, our homeland will be completely different in the next 50 years, because we will be the most populous continent in the world as well too. Half of the continent is under 25. So just imagine what 25 years of intentional work, intentional investment could do. It'll be a utopia. So it's not far-fetched. And I truly believe that.
So the Wakanda reality could be a reality, right? So
100%. And we have to be gatekeepers of communities and ecosystems that our people are exposed to.
And that's what you've been emphasizing, right? We have to be the gatekeepers, the purveyors.
We have to be the gatekeepers, because we have a unique advantage.
Yes.
Today, I could sit in a boardroom in corporate America, talk about healthcare, and sit in a boardroom in the Gambia or local village and talk about healthcare. So I have a unique perspective to be able to relate in two ecosystems where I could neither be fooled or cajoled in both ecosystems, because I am of both ecosystems. That is the power that most people have that could leverage to kind of build the future of the world, honestly, that's more equitable from a healthcare standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from an education standpoint. We have to be gatekeepers to be able to tell our own stories, provide our own services, and build healthier communities all around.
I think building a healthy community is very important, and we have to tell our story, right?
Yes.
Because as the European tell the story, it is always for them to be the victors. We understand about the lion and the hunter. There's a comment here that says Africans really need to wake up, right? We got almost everything that it takes to have a better Africa, but our leaders are very wicked and heartless. What are your thoughts about this particular statement as we prepare to close? And if anybody else, if you have a comment or a question, Blackwood and others, put it in.
Our leaders are always the reflection of the people. I'm a firm believer in that. Whatever you see in African leadership is inherently of African societies. So I tell people, if you want to focus on the leaders, you'll always have a reason why something is not working. Leadership starts with us as individuals. What could we change as young Black people around the world? Because Africa is not inclusive enough, right? Young Black people, because every Black person has a right to Africa. And I think that every Black person has a right to Africa.
Claim
right?
your right.
So we have to be the change we want to be. We have to embody principles, moral character that we want to see in our leaders. And then it may not happen overnight. So most of the work that we're doing now, I may not live to see the fruits of Innovarex, because it may be a different world 50 years later when I may not be around. But because of the intentionality, the things that I'm doing now as a Black person who's choosing Africa, then Africa will be what we want it to be. But leaders will always be a reflection of us Black people. And I just believe in that.
So building for the long haul. We have Daniel Mabonu here. Do you want to have anything to say, Daniel, or you just want to make the ticker tape roll? Which one is it? He's the leader of this entire operation. I'm simply just a facilitator.
Well, my gratitude extends to him as well too, because I think what you guys are doing is so powerful, and it's part of the journey as well.
Daniel is not saying anything. Maybe doesn't have good connectivity, but he is here. And again, we want to say kudos to him and the Pan African Leadership Center and the United States of Africa that he's pushing for, and also a part of Black Mental Health Matters. And this has been viewed by that, and as well as Speak Black to Me. So I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Badgett, for coming through, taking out time from your family to have this conversation. And we want to let people know that this is the Pan African Leadership Center, and we've been listening to Dr. Ismail Badji from the Gambia, a brother who came to the United States to become educated at an HBCU, which is almost an anomaly in the sense that people don't leave the continent of Africa to come to a Black space. But he understood and was taught to understand the power of Blackness and a Pan-African identity. He shared with us the importance of having ecosystems that we control, that we have to also control the revenue models that impact our business. He's the founder, the owner of Innovarex Global Health, innovative ways of providing medicine. That's thus Innovarex. He is one who is expanding the way that we engage in health and healthcare on the continent and throughout the world. We have been blessed to have him to be a part of this. And if you don't know about him, you will be knowing about him soon, because he is changing how we do business, how we provide health to our people, and more importantly, how healthcare is delivered on the continent of Africa. He's told us that we need to control our narrative and how we tell the story. This is very critical to the process of passing down accurate information. All of these things are critical when we talk about the Pan-African agenda. So he's not one who's talking about Pan-Africanism. He lives it every single day. And I am thankful to him for giving me an opportunity to visit the space. And when I say give me an opportunity, he simply told me what was happening. We contacted him and we moved into a discussion about what ifs, and what ifs turned into, okay, I'm on a plane, I'm on my way. Somehow he left before I got there, which was an unfair proposition. So there I'm there trying to figure out what to do. But he left me in good hands. The community took care of us. And so we did connect eventually on the first trip. And so we are excited about building the relationship. So Dr. Badgett, thank you. Again, people are commenting now, or people woke up all of a sudden, but do you have a natural path doctors in Africa is the question here by Dean Phillips. And the answer would be yes. Go ahead.
Not yet, but once again, where Innovarex Global Health, so whatever is in the space of healing, I think the company has an umbrella for it. And I'm a firm believer, Dr. Washington knows this about possibilities, what if. So I think when that opportunity time comes in, because we allow people to define what wellness means to them, and then we help provide it in a more convenient way. So that's definitely something we'll bookmark to see what opportunities could be.
Thank you very much. Pan African Leadership Center, we're out.
Absolutely.